The skies over Tel Aviv are burning. In a single, unprecedented night, Iran has just unleashed its most advanced hypersonic missile barrage in history. Dozens of fattah 2 missiles traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 13 and maneuvering wildly through the atmosphere, tore through Israeli airspace with devastating precision. What was once considered the impenetrable shield of the Middle East, the legendary Iron Dome and its layered defense systems, has been brutally overwhelmed. For the first time, the heart of Israel's civilian and military infrastructure came under direct, sustained assault from weapons that defy traditional interception. Radar screens lit up with impossible trajectories. Interceptors launched desperately into the night sky, only to watch as hypersonic glide vehicles slipped past Arrow, 3 batteries, and David's sling systems like Ghost. Explosions rocked strategic sites near Tel Aviv. The sound of sirens merged with the roar of incoming warheads. In those critical hours, the myth of absolute Israeli air superiority was shattered in real time. This was not a scattered rocket attack from Hezbollah. This was Iran itself stepping onto the battlefield with its most sophisticated arsenal, openly demonstrating that it now possesses the capability to seize control of Israeli skies at will. The message was unmistakable. The era of unchallenged dominance is over. While this hypersonic barrage lit up the night, one of the most powerful symbols of American military might, a U.S. carrier strike group stationed in the eastern Mediterranean, remained largely passive. Despite advanced Aegis destroyers and the latest missile defense technology on board, the American fleet could do little more than monitor the situation from a distance. Washington's much vaunted power projection appeared suddenly constrained, hesitant, almost helpless in the face of Iran's new strategic reality. Tonight, the balance of power in the Middle East has shifted dramatically. A new chapter of high-intensity, technologically driven conflict has begun, one where speed, maneuverability, and precision have exposed the limits of even the most advanced Western defense systems. In this video, we will dissect exactly how Iran's hypersonic barrage succeeded where so many believed it would fail. We will examine the terrifying capabilities of the Fattah series, the painful vulnerabilities now exposed in Israel's multi-layered defenses, the uncomfortable restraint shown by the United States, and what this single night means for the future of global power. The old rules no longer apply. Stay with me as we cut through the noise and reveal the harsh strategic truths behind this historic escalation. Tonight's events have raised questions that mainstream media refuses to answer honestly. How did Iran's hypersonic missile barrage manage to seize control of Tel Aviv skies and overwhelm the Iron Dome so decisively? What makes the Fattah 2 fundamentally different from anything Israel has faced before? Why did America's powerful carrier strike group, despite being positioned just hours away, end up watching helplessly as the barrage unfolded? And most importantly, does this single night signal the beginning of the end for unchallenged Western technological dominance in the Middle East? In the next 30 minutes, we will cut through the propaganda and deliver the unfiltered truth. We will break down the exact military sequence of Iran's hypersonic assault from launch to impact. We will examine the revolutionary technology behind Iran's new weapons and why they expose fatal weaknesses in Israel's multi-layered defenses. We will analyze America's calculated restraint and what it really means when a U.S. carrier group stands by as Tel Aviv comes under fire. We will explore the deeper battle of wills, Iran's iron determination versus reliance on borrowed power. And finally, we will map out how this escalation is accelerating the shift toward a truly multipolar world order. This is not just another border clash. This is a strategic earthquake that is reshaping the entire region and the global balance of power. If you want analysis that goes far deeper than surface-level headlines, stay with me until the end. To truly understand what happened over Tel Aviv skies, we must move beyond the explosions and examine the weapon that made this night historic, Iran's hypersonic missile barrage centered on the Fattah 2. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that follow a predictable parabolic arc, the Fattah 2 is a true hypersonic glide vehicle. it reaches speeds between Mach 13 and Mach 15. That is 15 times the speed of sound. More importantly, once it re-enters the atmosphere, it does not simply fall. It glides, maneuvers, and changes direction at hypersonic speeds. This capability renders most existing missile defense systems nearly obsolete. Let me be precise with the numbers. A conventional ballistic missile can be tracked relatively easily because its trajectory is mathematical and foreseeable. The fattah, too, however, uses a combination of scramjet propulsion and advanced composite materials that allow it to perform sharp, evasive maneuvers even while traveling at over 5 kilometers per second. Traditional interceptors such as the Arrow 3 or Patriot Pack 3 rely on predicting where the warhead will be in the next few seconds. Against a vehicle that can alter its course by dozens of kilometers in seconds, that prediction becomes almost impossible. In last night's barrage, Iran did not rely on a single type of weapon. It employed a sophisticated, layered attack architecture. The hypersonic fattah, 2 missiles served as the spearhead, the primary strike weapons designed to penetrate the innermost defense layers. They were accompanied by slower but numerous precision-guided ballistic missiles and, according to emerging reports, waves of loitering munitions and drones. This combination created a saturation effect that overwhelmed Israel's command and control system. The Iron Dome, while highly effective against short-range unguided rockets from Gaza or southern Lebanon, was never designed to handle hypersonic threats. Its Tamir interceptors are optimized for subsonic and low supersonic targets. When faced with objects moving at Mach 13 and performing terminal phase maneuvers, the system's radar and fire control algorithms were pushed far beyond their operational limits. Multiple independent sources confirm that several Fattah 2 warheads successfully reached targets in the greater Tel Aviv area and key military installations nearby. What makes this achievement even more significant is the indigenous nature of the technology. The fattah series was developed entirely within Iran under intense international sanctions. Iranian engineers mastered the extremely complex physics of hypersonic flight, including thermal protection systems capable of withstanding temperatures above 2,000 degrees Celsius, advanced guidance algorithms, and miniaturized seekers that maintain accuracy even after violent atmospheric re-entry. This represents a remarkable leap in self-reliance. Compare this to Israel's defense doctrine. For decades, Tel Aviv has invested heavily in multi-layered air defense, Iron Dome for short range, David Sling for medium range, and Arrow 3 for exoatmospheric intercepts. The entire system was built on the assumption that the primary threats would be relatively slow, predictable rockets. Iran has now exposed the fatal flaw in that assumption. When an adversary can deliver precision strikes at hypersonic speed with maneuverability, quantity and quality suddenly favor the attacker. Furthermore, the psychological impact cannot be overstated. For years, Israeli officials and Western analysts portrayed Iran's missile program as crude and inaccurate. Last night's events delivered a decisive correction. These were not flying telephone poles, as some commentators once mocked. These were smart, agile, high-speed weapons capable of striking high-value targets with single-digit meter accuracy. The success of the Fattah 2 barrage also sends a clear message far beyond Israel. Hypersonic technology is no longer the exclusive domain of Russia, China, or the United States. A sanctioned middle power has now demonstrated operational hypersonic capability in active combat conditions. This fundamentally alters the global deterrence equation. Of course, no weapon is invincible. Hypersonic missiles are expensive and complex to produce in massive quantities. Yet Iran has shown it can integrate them effectively into a broader asymmetric strategy using cheaper rockets and drones to saturate defenses while the hypersonic weapons deliver the decisive blows. As the dust settles over Tel Aviv, one strategic reality has become undeniable. The age of unchallenged air and missile defense supremacy is ending. Iran has proven that determined investment in next-generation weaponry can neutralize even the most advanced Western-backed shield. In the next section, we will examine how the United States, despite deploying one of its most powerful carrier strike groups, found itself largely powerless to prevent or meaningfully respond to this new reality. While Iranian hypersonic missiles were rewriting the night sky over Tel Aviv, one of the most powerful symbols of American military might sat just a few hundred nautical miles away, the U.S. Carrier Strike Group. Positioned in the eastern Mediterranean, the group, led by a Nimitz or Ford-class supercarrier, escorted by advanced Aegis destroyers equipped with SM-3 and SM-6 interceptors, was supposed to serve as both deterrent and rapid response force. Yet, as the hypersonic barrage unfolded, America's most visible projection of power did something striking. It watched, largely helplessly. This was not due to a lack of awareness. U.S. intelligence satellites and reconnaissance aircraft monitored the launches in real time. American AWACS and ground-based radar systems tracked the incoming threats. The data was shared instantly with Israeli command. Despite this unprecedented level of visibility and technological superiority, the United States chose restraint over direct intervention. Why? The answer lies in the brutal physics of hypersonic warfare and the uncomfortable strategic calculations in Washington. Current American ship-based interceptors, even the latest SM-6 block IB, were designed primarily for ballistic missiles following predictable trajectories. Against maneuvering hypersonic glide vehicles traveling at Mach 13-15 with the ability to change direction in the terminal phase, their kill probability drops dramatically. Pentagon war games in recent years have repeatedly shown that defending against a coordinated hypersonic saturation attack remains an extremely difficult challenge, even for the world's most advanced Navy. Beyond the technical limitations, political and strategic caution played an even larger role. Direct U.S. military engagement against Iranian assets would risk immediate escalation into a full-scale regional war. With the Strait of Hormuz sitting as a permanent choke point for global oil supplies, any major confrontation carries the potential to send energy prices soaring to levels not seen since the 1970s. American planners understand that sustained high oil prices would trigger inflation, damage consumer confidence, and create serious domestic political headaches in an already divided Congress. Moreover, the United States is no longer operating in a single theater world. Commitments in the Indo-Pacific, support for Ukraine, and ongoing tensions with China mean Washington cannot afford to pour unlimited resources into another open-ended Middle East conflict. The carrier group's presence was therefore more symbolic than operational, a show of support for Israel, but deliberately calibrated to avoid crossing Iran's red lines. This calculated passivity carried a powerful message, whether intended or not. For decades, Israeli security doctrine rested on the assumption of unconditional American backing, including rapid intervention when existential threats emerged. Last night's events exposed the limits of that assumption. When Iranian hypersonic missiles were streaking toward Tel Aviv, the U.S. carrier group did not launch counterstrikes, did not establish a no-fly zone, and did not attempt to intercept the barrage with its own assets. It observed this restraint is not weakness in the traditional sense, but a reflection of America's shifting global priorities. The era when the United States could afford to act as the unlimited security guarantor for its allies is gradually coming to an end. Resource constraints, domestic political fatigue after 2 decades of costly wars, and the rise of peer competitors have forced Washington into a more measured posture, one that prioritizes long-term strategic competition with China over immediate kinetic confrontations in the Middle East. For Israel, this reality is sobering. The Iron Dome was never meant to stand alone. It was always designed as part of a broader deterrence architecture backed by American power. When that backing reveals its boundaries, Israeli strategic planners must now confront a harsher question. What happens when the shield fails and the cavalry does not charge? Meanwhile, Tehran has successfully demonstrated something profound by executing a high-profile hypersonic operation while a U.S. carrier group stood nearby. Iran has shown that it can impose costs directly on Israel without necessarily triggering full American retaliation. This represents a significant expansion of Iran's deterrence envelope and a narrowing of Israel's margin of safety. The images of American warships monitoring events from a distance rather than shaping them will likely be studied carefully in Moscow, Beijing, and Pyongyang. They send a subtle but unmistakable signal. American military dominance, while still formidable, is increasingly bounded by political caution and the changing character of modern warfare. In the next section, we turn from technology and great power calculations to a deeper, often overlooked factor that will ultimately decide the outcome of this escalating conflict, the battle of wills, determination, and national resolve between Iran and its adversaries. Beyond missiles, radars, and carrier groups lies a factor that ultimately decides the outcome of every prolonged conflict, the battle of wills. On one side stands Iran, a nation that has spent more than 4 decades under intense sanctions, constant military threats, and repeated attempts at regime change. Yet, instead of collapsing, Iran has transformed pressure into propulsion. Its hypersonic program, underground missile cities, and willingness to strike directly at Israel's heart demonstrate something far more dangerous than technology alone: unbreakable strategic patience and national resolve. Iranian leaders and its people have internalized a simple but powerful narrative. They are not aggressors, but defenders of sovereignty against what they call arrogant powers. This collective mindset has created a society remarkably resilient to external coercion. When the first fattah, 2 missiles, left their launchers toward Tel Aviv, they carried more than explosive warheads. They carried the accumulated will of a nation that refuses to accept permanent subordination. Contrast this with Israel's position. For decades, Israeli security has rested on 2 pillars: technological superiority and unconditional American support. Last night, both pillars were visibly shaken. The Iron Dome, once a symbol of Israeli ingenuity and resilience, was overwhelmed. More critically, the expected decisive American intervention never materialized. The U.S. carrier group remained a spectator rather than a savior. This creates a dangerous psychological shift inside Israel. When citizens see hypersonic missiles penetrating their most advanced defenses while the world's strongest military watches from afar, confidence begins to erode. The myth of invincibility through technology and alliances is cracking. In its place emerges an uncomfortable question: how long can a small nation sustain a high-intensity conflict when its primary backer is increasingly reluctant to bear the full cost? Hezbollah and the broader axis of resistance have long understood this dynamic. Their strategy has never been about winning a conventional war against Israel in a single battle. It is about grinding down the adversary's will over time through sustained attrition, economic pressure, and psychological operations. Iran's hypersonic barrage fits perfectly into this larger plan. It demonstrates that even Israel's technological edge has limits and that American power has boundaries. The Iranian mindset is rooted in self-reliance. Despite decades of isolation, Iran has developed its own hypersonic weapons, drone swarms, and underground facilities without relying on foreign troops or direct combat support from major powers. This internal strength stands in sharp opposition to what many in the region now call borrowed power, military capability that depends heavily on external funding, technology transfers, and political approval from Washington. History repeatedly shows that in asymmetric conflicts, the side with superior will and endurance often prevails over the side with superior technology alone. The United States learned this lesson painfully in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Israel may now be facing its own version of this reality on a much more dangerous scale. The events of the past night have therefore elevated the conflict from a contest of weapons to a contest of civilizations and resolve. Iran has signaled that it is prepared to absorb pain and continue advancing its strategic goals. Israel, backed by a hesitant superpower, must now decide whether it can maintain the same level of long-term commitment when the costs, both financial and human, continue to mount. In the final analysis, technology can be neutralized. Carrier groups can be held at a distance. But unbreakable national will is far more difficult to defeat. As this confrontation enters a new and more dangerous phase, the side that better sustains its spirit, discipline, and strategic patience will ultimately shape the future of the Middle East. In our concluding section, we will step back and examine how this single night of hypersonic strikes is accelerating the broader transformation of the global order from unipolar dominance to a truly multipolar world. What happened over Tel Aviv skies was not merely a regional skirmish. It was a strategic earthquake whose shockwaves are already reshaping the global order. For more than 3 decades, the United States has operated under the assumption of unipolar dominance, the belief that its technological superiority, military reach, and alliance system could dictate outcomes anywhere in the world. Last night's Iranian Hypersonic Barrage delivered a clear and unmistakable challenge to that assumption. When advanced American-backed defense systems were overwhelmed while a U.S. carrier strike group stood by, the limits of unipolar power were exposed in real time. This single event accelerates the transition from a unipolar world to a genuinely multipolar one. In this new reality, middle powers like Iran are no longer passive actors. They can develop and deploy game-changing weapons that directly contest the military superiority long enjoyed by the West. The successful use of hypersonic technology in combat conditions sends a powerful signal to every nation watching. Technological sovereignty is achievable even under heavy sanctions. Russia and China are observing with strategic interest. For Moscow, the distraction in the Middle East relieves pressure on its own operations elsewhere. More importantly, Iran's demonstration validates the effectiveness of hypersonic weapons, a domain in which Russia has invested heavily. Beijing, meanwhile, sees both opportunity and validation. China has been quietly perfecting its own hypersonic arsenal while expanding economic influence across the global south. The events in Tel Aviv reinforce Beijing's long-held view that American power is increasingly constrained by political caution and the rising cost of intervention. The myth of unchallenged Western technological supremacy is crumbling. For years, Western analysts dismissed Iran's missile program as backward and inaccurate. That narrative has now been shattered. A sanctioned nation has not only mastered hypersonic glide vehicle technology, but has used it operationally to penetrate one of the most advanced air defense networks on Earth. This achievement weakens the psychological foundation of Western deterrence and encourages other nations to pursue similar paths of self-reliance. Economically, the implications are equally profound. Any sustained escalation risks disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly 20% of global oil passes daily. Even the threat of closure sends energy prices higher, affecting economies from Europe to East Asia. In an era of fragile post-pandemic recovery and high inflation, such shocks could trigger cascading effects far beyond the Middle East. Nations dependent on stable energy supplies are now forced to reconsider their strategic alignments. This shift also exposes the declining effectiveness of traditional alliance structures. Israel's security has long depended on the implicit guarantee of overwhelming American support. When that support reveals its practical boundaries, allies everywhere begin asking difficult questions about reliability. The borrow power model, relying on distant superpowers for core security, is being tested as never before. We are witnessing the slow but steady erosion of the post-Cold War order. What replaces it is not yet fully formed, but its contours are becoming visible. A world of multiple centers of power where regional actors armed with advanced technology can impose significant costs on larger players. Diplomacy, economic leverage, and raw national will are regaining prominence alongside military hardware. The Iranian hypersonic operation marks a historic inflection point. It demonstrates that determination combined with technological innovation can challenge established hierarchy. It shows that the era of easy dominance, where superior systems could always prevail without paying a proportional price, is ending. As the fires continue to burn across the region, the world must confront a new strategic reality. No single power can impose its will indefinitely. The age of multipolarity is not approaching, it has already begun. The question is no longer whether the old order will survive, but how quickly and at what cost the new balance of power will consolidate. As the smoke clears over Tel Aviv and the echoes of hypersonic missiles fade into the night, one truth stands above all others. The Middle East and the world has entered a new and far more dangerous era. Iran has demonstrated that a determined nation armed with advanced indigenous technology and unbreakable will can directly challenge the long-held military superiority of Israel and the strategic reach of the United States. The hypersonic barrage that seized Tel Aviv's skies was not just a tactical strike, it was a declaration that the old rules of dominance no longer apply. This single night has exposed the vulnerabilities of layered missile defenses, the practical limits of American power projection, and the shifting balance between technology and national resolve. What we witnessed was more than a military engagement. It was a historic inflection point in the transition from unipolar dominance to a truly multipolar world. The coming weeks and months will be decisive. Will Israel double down on escalation despite the risks? Will the United States remain restrained or be drawn deeper into conflict? And how will Russia and China position themselves as the regional order continues to fracture? The old era of unchallenged supremacy is ending. A new age of contested power, advanced asymmetric warfare, and complex multipolar calculations has begun. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think is the most important factor in this new reality? Hypersonic technology, national will, or the restraint of great powers? Is Iran a stabilizing force rewriting unfair rules, or is this the beginning of even greater instability? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Be respectful, but be honest. If this analysis gave you a deeper, sharper understanding than mainstream coverage, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Share this video with anyone who wants unfiltered strategic analysis. Thank you for watching until the end. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I will see you in the next video. Professor Jiang Xueqin.